tomorrow night, and I thought, this is a nice conversation. That's very good. So it's really fun to see so many friends here. Thanks for coming, and hope you're paying sharp attention. Pastor Nathaniel asked me to remind everybody, feel free to text him your questions, and he did tell me that I can expect that the hardest question will come to me first. If you want to see me flummoxed and embarrassed, even more than I usually am, maybe that's a little motivation. That's like the easy equivalent of the dunk tank thing, where you get to embarrass the pastor. Anyways, so text Pastor Nathaniel. And by the way, that's his real phone number. So now you can call him up middle of the night, and he may block you, but you'll at least get that first call in, right? So he can't block everybody. Anyways, just joking. No spamming. Our next speaker is a good friend of mine and actually my former pastor, Mark Jones. He's the pastor of Faith Vancouver, which is a church in Vancouver, BC. And he came all the way here to be with us tonight and tomorrow. Pastor Mark writes books, and he often writes books that are big and hard to read, or at least they're a little harder to read than some things on Twitter and other things like that, but they're not that hard to read, actually. But a few years ago, he wrote a book that's up here, and this is a lovely little book that's very easy to read and very moving and very personal. And it's called If I Could Speak, Letters from the Womb. And in this little book, an unborn baby girl actually gets the voice that she otherwise wouldn't have and writes some letters to her expectant mother and father. And these are very personal little glimpses of what life is like from that perspective. And so we asked Mark if he would share some thoughts on maybe how we could better understand this big question of abortion, not only in a sort of large-scale way, like history and logic and arguments and things like that, but also understanding maybe through the very little eyes that we all used to have ourselves, but we no longer have that perspective on life. And while we were that little, we couldn't think clearly for ourselves, of course. But we all were that little once, and now we get a chance to have a glimpse from that perspective on this big subject. So please welcome Mark Jones and hear from him.
Okay. I was flying last night back from West Virginia or Pittsburgh to Vancouver, and I don't normally watch movies on the plane, but I watched a movie called Capote, and it's about the novelist Truman Capote, who kind of revolutionized what's called now literary nonfiction. And he wasn't a godly man by any means, but was a genius of sorts, and wrote the book in cold blood. And it's interesting the way in which he takes history and learns about things that happen, but puts it into a type of prose that would be a novel, for example. And he would do sometimes public readings of sections from his book to garner interest and fill up auditoriums. He was the equivalent of what Taylor Swift might be today, back then, when novelists of his quality were the real rock stars alongside the rock stars. And this book is a little bit of literary nonfiction insofar as there's history. I'll get to some of that. There's science. There is theology. And then there's the sort of combining all of that into what Calvin alluded to earlier, the impassioned plea of a child. And so this book does require a little bit of indulgence from the reader. And I make a point in the introduction that all people will find themselves in a unique situation. especially expectant mothers. And we all have a story to tell, and we all have various explanations for our actions, and we all aim to some extent to excuse ourselves for the choices that we make that can cause us a crisis of conscience. And so this book, which is short, and it has pictures, they're not graphic pictures by any stretch of the imagination, takes a fictional scenario of a preborn child, roughly 20 weeks old, who writes letters to her mother. And she puts forth a case over the course of the book for why her mother should decide to keep her and raise her instead of having an abortion, hence the title, If I Could Speak, Letters from the Womb. Now, naturally, if any of us were in a life or death situation and we could write letters to the person who had authority to grant us life or end our life, we would give an impassioned case. And so I make no apologies for the nature of how the letters are written. And while this book is for everyone, it is especially aimed at expecting mothers who are wrestling with the question of whether they want to keep the child or not. There are always those who, no matter what you say, unless a miracle happens, they're decided on the issue that they will keep the child or will not keep the child. And then there can sometimes be a group where they could lean in a certain direction to maybe wanting to or not wanting to. And so, as we heard earlier, the concept of a wanted child, it's not a black and white issue always, given the nature of what we are as people. It's not inconceivable that a child can be partly wanted and partly not wanted. Partly not wanted for certain reasons and partly wanted for other reasons. And so it is a bit misleading to talk about a wanted child being the only child that should survive, because, of course, there are many who have maybe partly not wanted it, but had the child and been grateful. Now, the pictures, which are there in the book, I can't really show those to you, but I'm going to give you a bit of a taste of the book from reading some of the chapters. And this is a way in which it's designed to get you to think a little bit differently about the angle of the debate. And what I do for each short chapter, or short reading or letter is begin almost always, unless she's writing to the father, by saying, "Dear Mommy." And then the first sentence of the chapter is also the last sentence of the chapter, and it kind of introduces what the chapter will be about. If you look at Psalm 8, for example, the opening verse to Psalm 8 and the closing verse to Psalm 8 are roughly the same. But in the middle, you have the argument that proves the first verse, "O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth." And then the psalmist goes into the reasons why God's name is excellent in all the earth. And interestingly, in Psalm 8, you have that verse that from the mouths of babes and infants you have ordained praise. And so from the mouth of a baby girl that I call Zoe, and I wonder if anyone knows why I might call her Zoe. No prizes for pastors. Anyone else got an idea why she might be called Zoe? For the first, you can have the first Bubba tea or whatever it is if you get the answer right. Yes?
I'm not sure if this is right, but I heard that Zoe means life.
Very good. So Zoe means life, Greek for life. So there's little like things in the book where names and phrases are used, and it's meant to help you. So the first chapter, I'm not going to read it, but the first chapter, which is a little bit more scientific, begins, "I can hear your voice." And then obviously closes with those words, "I can hear your voice." Other chapters as they go on, I'm just going to give you the sort of introduction and then help you to understand what's going on. This fourth chapter is, "I would like a name." And I do certain things throughout the book where I quote lyrics from songs. Jim Croce, you'd have to be over the age of 40 to understand who Jim Croce is, or you've watched Stranger Things, because then you'd know I've Got a Name is a song by Jim Croce. But then I also have a rap artist in one of the chapters who he feels really bad about the fact that the woman he had impregnated had an abortion, and he writes a rap song that is thinking about certain aspects of who this person was. So, Dear Mommy, I would like a name. Dear Mommy, you were here once. So writing to her mom saying, you were in my situation at one time. This is just to give you a flavor of the book. Dear Mommy, I will take care of you one day. Giving that idea to the mom that one day the mom is going to need the daughter, because parents who look after their children from a young age when they are helpless require very often the care of their children when they get older. Following from that, there's a letter to her daddy, Happy Father's Day, and writes to him on Father's Day. Again, it's meant to move him. And after that letter to her father, I'm going to read from chapter 8, the full letter, and this is where I bring in a phrase from Nelson Mandela, the South African president who is very well known. So I'm going to start with chapter 8, or letter 8. Dear Mommy, your freedom and mine cannot be separated. In the mid-1980s, Nelson Mandela was offered a conditional release from prison. But the terms of his release meant that he was not going to be as free as a white South African. People, because of their race, or in my case, my location and size, have lacked certain fundamental rights over the course of world history. In a statement read on his behalf by his daughter, Mandela asked, "What freedom am I being offered when I must ask for permission to live in an urban area? What freedom am I being offered when I need a stamp in my pass to seek work? What freedom am I being offered when my very South African citizenship is not respected?" It seems strange to me that many should publicly decry the system of apartheid in South Africa because non-whites lacked certain rights that whites enjoyed. But many of these same people feel that the preborn children should not have any rights, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What rights do I have? Or, if I may ask you directly, what rights do you think I should have as a person? We are both human beings, but only the bigger, more developed person has rights. The smaller, more helpless person does not have rights. Interestingly, the Declaration on the Rights of the Child in 1959 says, whereas the child, by reason of their physical and mental immaturity, needs special safeguards and care, including appropriate legal protection before as well as after birth. Whereas the need for such special safeguards has been stated in the Geneva Declaration of the Rights of the Child of 1924 and recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the statutes of specialized agencies and international organizations concerned with the welfare of children, whereas mankind owes to the child the best it has to give, mankind owes to the child the best it has to give by plucking preborn children from the womb, sometimes limb by limb? ? Is that the best that mankind has to give to a child? There have been many atrocities over the course of world history whereupon certain classes of people have been subjugated because they were powerless. Do you not see how the preborn are the largest class of people in history to have suffered for no other reason than that they simply cannot fight back against the decision of their mother to abort them? I believe that your rights and freedoms should not come at the expense of my rights and freedom and life. Mommy, I value your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but not at the expense of my own rights to those things which we should both equally share. As Nelson Mandela famously said at the end of his statement, your freedom and mine cannot be separated. Love, Zoe. One of the reasons that I pushed that chapter is because a lot of the people on the side of the pro-abortion debate will also publicly speak about how they are so concerned for the rights of other people, whoever they may be. And so it's obviously strategic in what I'm trying to do. That was a bit more focused on the historical side, looking at Nelson Mandela. In letter 9, I go more to the theological side. Dear Mommy, God was here once. The Christian religion makes many sensational claims that at first seem quite ridiculous. But when you take time to think about what is claimed, it is rather compelling. We might argue, as many do, that the suffering and evil in this world is a reason not to believe in God. And yet the Christian religion claims that, far from being a casual observer of this mess, the eternal Son of God condescended and assumed to himself a true human nature consisting of both a body and soul. God the Son became a man and suffered even to the point of death on a cross. At the center of the Christian faith is the belief in the incarnation, the enfleshment of the Son of God. In need of nothing because he possesses everything, the Son takes on a human nature, body and soul, so that he needs care from his mother from the moment of his miraculous conception. When you think about it, it really is a beautiful story of God's love for humanity. What is the most precious thing in the universe to God the Father? For all the value God places on each human being who is made in his image, there is one person who occupies God's heart more than anyone else, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And where did God place the most precious person in the world? In a womb. The Almighty God, perfect in his being and in need of nothing, sent his Son into the world to become a fetus that would be cared for by a virgin young lady. If anyone had a right to be terrified of what awaited her, consider Mary. Mary and Joseph did not have great financial means. They would find themselves fleeing to Egypt to protect their newborn boy, and one day Mary would see her son publicly crucified at the hands of the Romans. But from the beginning, she praised God for the gift he had given not just to her, but also to all mankind. God did not send his Son to earth in the form of a grown man to live and die for our sins. Rather, God began with conception in the womb of the Virgin Mary. The safest place in the world for Jesus was his mother's womb. God so values the womb that he put his beloved Son there. Perhaps we fail to grasp how incredible this truth is. God was placed in a womb. It is as shocking as the truth that God lay in a tomb. The Virgin Mary's womb was a designated safety zone where the Son of God's human nature would be formed with the utmost care. God was not just showing the world how much he loves the world by offering his only begotten Son as a sacrifice for sinners. He was also showing the world that he values women and the safety zone known as the womb. The Christian faith shows us that God loves the womb of a woman. He created the womb for his Son to dwell in at the most vulnerable stage of his earthly life. By extension, God has done the same for each of us. The womb is God's designated place of safety, but now it has become the most unsafe place in the world, with approximately 42 million abortions taking place worldwide in 2018. That's like wiping out the population of Canada and then some each year, which is sad to think about because Canadians are just so nice. I find it compelling that God shows his power to us in weakness. He becomes a baby dependent upon his mother. I mean, think about it. If Jesus is both fully man and fully God, then he was at once upholding the universe and yet was also being upheld in the womb of his mother. And he cried upon entering the world. He was entering our grief. If you're going to make up a religion, then surely you wouldn't make up what the Christian faith claims. To say that God enters the world in a womb and later finds himself in a tomb, only to be raised again from the dead, seems to be something only God could conceive. In any case, I am comforted by the fact that not only are you reading this letter, but God also sees me. He knows me, he loves me, and I believe he wants me to have the privilege of living my life under his rule and for his glory. Say what you want about the Christian faith, but we can't accuse the God of the Bible of not caring about the suffering and difficulties of the Christian life. Christ the Lord suffered, and the path to his life of suffering was through entering the world in a womb. God was here once. Love, Zoe. I then, in chapter 10, write, and I'll just give you the chapter title, I'd rather be adopted than aborted. My dad was adopted, so it was one of the impetus for writing this book was the fact that abortion was illegal when my dad's biological mother had conceived him. And so he was born because of a law that meant she could not get an abortion. And so I am standing here today with breath in my lungs because someone decided to give birth to my dad, even though in a certain sense he was unwanted. And someone took him in as an adoptive mother who was my grandmother, whom I loved. And so that chapter, I'd rather be adopted than aborted. I also have a chapter, I wish I were a baby eagle, because eagles' eggs are more protected than human lives when you look at various laws. There's all sorts of different ways I'm trying to get Zoe's mom through the mouth of Zoe, of course, to keep her. Dear Mommy, I'm scared is another chapter. Dear Mommy, there is forgiveness. And this kind of paints the picture of Zoe, who is possibly resigned to the fact that she may not be kept, for her mom to understand there really is forgiveness because of the guilt and shame that comes from an abortion. Obviously, there is no desire from Zoe for her mom to go through with this, but maybe down the road there's going to be the inevitable guilt and forgiveness. And so Zoe is, in a sense, preaching the gospel beforehand to try and get her to understand that God is merciful and compassionate, but at the same time saying that this should not take place. There's a very short chapter, Dear Mommy, it's sort of her final words in a sense, I love you. How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. That's from Winnie the Pooh. For me, the beginning has turned out to be the end. I love you. I wish you loved me too. Zoe. And then at the end of the book, the mom writes to Zoe. I'm going to conclude with chapter 15. Dear Zoe, I miss you. It has been 10 years since I chose to have an abortion. A lot has happened in that time. Your dad and I married 8 years ago. We are still childless, but we haven't tried in recent years without much success. We've tried in recent years without much success. For the last several years, I've worked with underprivileged children on a daily basis. Many of them do not have both parents in their home, but I try to bring some joy to their lives, even in small ways. There were many things you were right about concerning the joy that children can bring to one's life. I love their smiles when I bring my now world-famous brownies, without nuts, of course, for them to eat at snack time. You should know there isn't a day that goes by without my remembering you. I see children laughing, crying, playing, singing, and I can't help but think what it would be like to see you do those things. I see moms and dads picking up their children from our after-school program and feel some sadness and a bit of joy when I see children running into the arms of their parents. And I heard Sinead O'Connor's song, My Special Child, and it made me cry. Your dad and I go out for dinner, and as we see families, I'm again reminded of what could have been. The kids' menu hasn't surfaced on our table yet with the coloring crayons. There are no colored pictures given to me. One particularly bad moment occurred last week. I was going to the grocery store and a Girl Guide was selling her cookies. I didn't have cash, but I said, "Oh, I love those cookies. I'm so sorry I can't buy one, but I don't have any money on me." The girl, apparently moved by my love for her cookies, gave me a box and told me I didn't have to pay, but I should pass on a kind deed to someone else. For some reason, I was reminded of your letters and thought that this Girl Guide is the girl I'm sure you could have been. Now I'm unable to have a child when I want a child. Before I was able but unwilling. Now I'm willing but unable. Of late, Nick, Dad, has been talking about adoption. And again, I was reminded of your letter that you'd rather be adopted than aborted. I suppose adopting a child is one way of us honoring your request. Anyway, I wanted to write this letter to you, knowing, of course, that you will never read it. But at least I'm able to say, given years of regret, that I'm sorry. Vain regrets aren't going to change what happened to you, but my sorry comes from my heart. I'm not just sorry because I want a child now and can't have one. I'm sorry because I was given a gift and I refused to open it. I was wrong. You were right. One last thing. It's Christmas time. Your dad and I are off to sing some carols and hymns at the Bible-believing church that we both go to now. I look forward to singing, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all you nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With the angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Remember when you wrote, God was here once? Indeed. And while there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of you and what could have been, I'm comforted by the fact that God has, through Jesus, forgiven me and given me peace. I miss you, but I am comforted by the hope that I may actually see you one day. That is my hope, a hope based on the gracious nature of a God who gave his Son as a ransom for many, including Nick and me. Love, Mommy. Well, that's the summary essence of the book. Those are some of the letters. I don't really know why some books sell and some books don't sell. This one, in a sense, hasn't been as sold as I had hoped, sadly. But I was at a funeral, Vodi Balcom, you may know of him. I went to his funeral and a gentleman came up to me and said, "Oh, are you Mark Jones?" I said, "Yes." He said, I just want to say how impactful this book has been, and we use it and hand it out. So on the one hand, I have to trust the Lord that he will put it in the hands of whoever needs to hear it. But on the other hand, I do think the church probably needs to do, and it doesn't need to be this book, it can be anything that's valuable and helpful, a better job of really trying to get Christians to pray and think and act upon the things that we say we believe. Well, here's the book. I'm going to leave it at the church if anyone actually wants to read it. I don't know if you have a library, or if you just want to be the first to come and steal it, just make sure you read it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. We will take our longer break now. There is boba tea that's being served in the room to my right. So if you go through these doors, you can find popcorn, boba tea. We'll reconvene in about 30 minutes. So 10 after 8 is about 30 minutes from now. Give us some time to fellowship. And of course, I've been having a few questions trickling in over the last few minutes, but there is still time to get your questions in, even during our Q&A. So do be texting that number that is on your brochure there. All right, we'll see you in 30 minutes.